Actually, I think Laura's going to do her time-traveling lawyer segment.
Whatever. Laura,
Right?
that's cool.
Oh, wow. And
Speaking of doing our jobs,
glorious
doing their
intro
jobs
that
Hey,
well.
guess what? I still did my
Yeah.
job better than the U.S. Senate.
There it is. There it is.
Welcome to Find Laws, Don't Judge Me, the show about the law in real life. I'm Laura Temmie, and I'm joined by Allie Marshall,
Hello.
Joe Fawbush,
Good day to you all.
and Andy Lannetti.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at how formal Joe was being.
Just trying to get us a little professionalism on this podcast, that's all.
Like, it's Friday
luck.
afternoon. That's not going to happen.
Nope.
So today we're talking about executive orders.
Woo!
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. We're talking about...
This is a great topic.
Yep, we're talking about what executive orders are, how other presidents have used them, and what we might expect to see as far as executive orders come January, February.
We'll veer here into political analysis for like 10 seconds that even if Democrats are able to capture control of the Senate in January runoffs, their majority will be the slimmest majority possible. And the House majority will also be extremely tight. So that renders the possibility of big legislation pretty much a non-starter because, you know, as we know, lawmakers will continue a point that I like to keep harping on throughout the life of this podcast. As lawmakers continue to abdicate their responsibility to actually make laws, it just means we are more likely to get more lawmaking from the executive branch and all of the fun that comes with that in the form of executive orders and new regulations that rely on existing statutory authority. So once again, shout out to the world's greatest deliberative body, the U.S. Senate, for really sucking at your job and prove me wrong.
Do we have those T-shirts printed yet? World's greatest deliberative body.
If I defy any of our listeners out there to find me a business or social club or anything that functions worse than the U.S. Senate. You guys,
Could you tell us how you really feel?
Yeah.
Yeah, Andy, you're always so cryptic about everything.
anyway. So, yeah, Joe, I think you have a little bit of a history lesson about executive orders before I start getting into the theoretical.
All right. Yeah, sure, Andy, I'll start.
Why, thank you, Joseph.
I guess you're very welcome. This is my audition tape for National Public Radio, so, you know, humor
Time
me.
for a little lesson.
I love it.
Yeah. No, actually, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what executive orders are, because there's no real definition. It's not in the Constitution. They can kind of encompass anything that's on the mind of the president. And
the media.
And the media, yep. We've seen executive orders on how best to celebrate Columbus Day.
Love it.
To
Actually, I don't love it at all. I hate it.
To things that are actually super important, like the internment of Japanese citizens during World War II. So there's a wide range of things that they can do. The other thing that I wanted to talk about that, Andy, you already touched on a little bit, is how important executive orders have become in the modern era. And it is mostly because Congress is delegating a lot more authority to the executive branch.
You're being very kind
and
here.
so I am. And so the importance that the executive branch plays in really kind of passing executive orders that have the force of law has, and this is my opinion, has increased in recent years. So Laura, you can get kind of into the
All right,
history.
I'm going
of
to interrupt one more time. It's not your opinion. It's quite correct.
Okay. All right. All right. So yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly too about Youngstown Sheet and Tube. This was a 50s Supreme Court case where the court kind of laid out the parameters under which the court can review executive orders for being constitutional. And actually, more than the majority, the concurring opinion by Justice Jackson has actually kind of helped establish the rule more so than the majority opinion by Justice Black. And under this framework, there's basically three different levels under which an executive order can be judged as constitutional. One, the highest one, is when Congress explicitly gives the president or the executive branch authority in that area. And in that case, the president has really wide latitude to accomplish what he or she wants. The second one he called the zone of twilight. And this
I
is...
love that book series. Loved it.
That was my dad's favorite show growing up.
No, that's Twilight Zone. I was thinking of the vampires. But yes, carry on, Joe.
It is actually a really weird way of phrasing it. But yeah, this is basically just the gray area where it's not clear. And then the third one, and the most difficult for the president to pass executive orders in, is the one where Congress has explicitly said the opposite of what the president wants to do. So that's kind of the tripartite framework under which we still use to determine whether an executive order is constitutional. And executive orders are regularly deemed unconstitutional. President Trump has had some that have been limited, some that have been deemed too much. So it does still happen.
As did President Obama before him and President Bush as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want to lay the blame
Yeah.
for the imperial presidency at the feet of one person.
No, and yeah, no, that's
we,
a good...
we probably can, and I'll get into it on Time Traveling Lawyer.
So a sneak peek, I'm guessing Laura's going to talk again about FDR, which is...
Of course.
Right? Yeah. We can't get away from
I can't
Hamilton.
seem to
and
stop talking about
Yeah.
FDR.
My favorite benevolent dictator, FDR.
So yeah, no, that was a good point though, Andy, because yeah, this is happening, really since FDR. So this is not a President Trump thing. This is not a President Obama thing. This is a all modern president thing, where executive orders seem to be increasing in importance and number. Each president in the modern era has, issued hundreds of these, whereas George Washington had one. So, executive orders are here to stay. And while they can be gone too far, go ahead, Andy.
I just want to say, anyone who is remotely interested in the sausage making on the Hill, I would encourage you to just read bills. And because executive orders all claim some sort of statutory authority. And read, legislation is, I know it's not in plain English, but just look for the phrase in legislative text, the Secretary of blank, blank, blank agency name, Health and Human Services, Education, Defense, whatever, shall promulgate regulations to, that is Congress abdicating its job to the executive branch. And it happens all the time.
And you're absolutely right in that almost every executive order that seeks to accomplish something says that it's doing so under a certain statute from Congress. That is right. There are a few things that sometimes go away from that. But then the executive orders that do that tend to be more for political showmanship than they are for actually accomplishing something, which sometimes does happen too, right? Sometimes executive orders are just issued because it's an affirmative action that a president can take unilaterally that says, I'm doing something and this is what I'm doing. And so that does sometimes happen too.
I was just thinking, I would love to have some executive order issuing power in my own household. I feel like this could be a really effective tool. And then like present it at the press conferences with like my signature and like my family must
You
abide by
listening,
this.
Jeff?
All right, anyway. Carry on.
No, I like that idea. Have a little ceremony around the kitchen table where you hold up like a signed, with a fancy pen.
Yep.
I like it.
Do the dishes.
Yeah. It is hereby ordered.
Damn it.
But yeah, that's all I got. I just kind of wanted to touch briefly on some of the basics for people who haven't been thinking about executive orders in a while. So I think, Laura, you've got some more stuff on the history of executive orders, and you can tell us more about Hamilton and FDR.
Yes, that's right, Joe. I apparently am also auditioning for NPR today. I feel like as I was writing this, but you are correct. I do have a Hamilton joke in here. So as Joe mentioned, every president, with the exception of William Henry Harrison, who famously died after only being president for a month, they've all issued executive orders, some more than others. George Washington had only 8, but our boy FDR issued more than 3,000. And our first few presidents didn't do a whole lot with executive orders. None really made a splash publicly until the Civil War. So first up, with a featured executive order, I guess, is Abraham Lincoln. Right before the Civil War broke out, state militias were starting to get riled up and Congress wasn't in session, which is, especially back then, was a very common time that executive orders would come out. And Lincoln wanted to lock up one of the militia leaders, John Merryman, so he had him arrested for treason and pretty much planned to hold him indefinitely. And Merryman's lawyer tried to get a writ of habeas corpus to get Merryman in front of a judge in a timely manner, as you're supposed to. And he's essentially saying, Mr. President, you can't just lock this guy up without giving him a trial. And Lincoln's response was essentially, and here's my Hamilton joke for the day, was, you know what, we can go ahead and change that. You know why? Because I'm the president. And so he issued an executive order that stripped Merryman of his habeas corpus rights. And that was basically it. Afterwards, Congress passed the Habeas Corpus Act, which allowed for this to happen in certain circumstances, and that was later repealed. But that was probably the first executive order that people were like, whoa, the president can do this? This is crazy. Oh, and actually, I have one more thing about Lincoln. Lincoln also issued what is arguably the most famous executive order, the Emancipation Proclamation. And then skipping ahead to Teddy Roosevelt, who was probably the first president to really go after it with executive orders. He issued more than 1,000.
Bully for him.
Bully.
And not to be outdone, as I mentioned, FDR issued more. I know, right? These Roosevelts, they love their executive orders. As we mentioned, FDR issued more than 3,000 executive orders during his time as president. To be exact, it was 3,721. So he was getting pretty close to 4,000, actually. And as Joe mentioned, one of the biggest, or I guess one of the first big challenges to an executive order was Harry Truman, who tried to take control of the steel industry via executive order during the Korean War. The Supreme Court pretty much said nope. And that was Youngstown Sheet Tube versus Sawyer. If you're in constitutional law right now, go ahead and use that summary in class. I'm sure you'll do really well. Truman also used an executive order to end racial segregation in the United States military, which is something that several presidents have used. They've taken the executive order and used it to enforce civil rights legislation. For example, Eisenhower used it in 1957 to send federal troops to Little Rock, Arkansas to help integrate the public schools. And executive orders also often come into play during wartime, whether it's taking control of the steel companies or in 1999 when President Clinton even waged a war via executive order by going around Congress and starting the Balkan War all by himself.
That opened a nice Pandora's box over the last 20 or so years.
It sure did, yeah. And I guess one last thing I wanted to talk about, because I find it interesting, is that executive orders were mostly undocumented and unnoticed by the general public until the early 1900s. It wasn't until 1907 when the State Department they started retroactively numbering executive orders, but for some reason they only went as far back as 1862. So President Lincoln's executive order on habeas corpus is actually known as Executive Order Number 1. And then it goes from there. But nobody seems to really know why they didn't go all the way back to Washington.
Bunch of lazy guys. Yeah. Was it they just gave up after? Yeah, that's good enough.
Man, it took forever to go. You could die of dysentery along the way.
Yep, exactly.
On trail.
So that's all I have for Time Traveling Lawyer. Thanks for letting me do that again.
Yeah, so let's move from the past into the future.
The future, the future, the future.
Yes, definitely. Please keep that in. The first thing I was thinking of was the old Conan O'Brien.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So let's, this is being recorded on November 20th, 2020. And so.
Do you need an alibi?
This is.
It is approximately 4 p.m. Central Standard Time.
All I'm gonna say is that this is all theoretical in nature of when these things might happen, depending on if and when the occupant of the at the head of the executive branch, changes. So there is a lot that activists are clamoring for a theoretical Joe Biden administration to do using executive action. Some activists are a little more realist about what can and cannot get done through Congress. And so it's likely that a first Biden term would look an awful lot like a second Obama term, where a lot of major policy changes like DACA happened through executive order, except people are now wanting a theoretical President Biden to go bigger than that. And so some of the potential, I've got a little rundown here of some of the potential big changes that might come and then subsequently get just stomped into the curb by the Supreme Court. So the first one is I'm also going to shout out David Dayen of the American Prospect magazine for doing a lot of this legwork for us. He's done a lot of work in a pretty lengthy project at that magazine called The First Day Agenda. And so anyway, a lot of this is taken from his ideas and his consultations with attorneys and activists and whoever else. One of the big ones is to use Section 1881A of the Social Security Act to extend free Medicare coverage to any person who is the subject of, quote, environmental exposure. many ways you can go here, including COVID-19, since basically everyone is being exposed to I guess, what you could loosely term an environmental hazard. People exposed to global warming, other things like that. The justification lies in a small provision in the Affordable Care Act, which used this law to extend Medicare coverage to the entire town of Libby, Montana. Residents there are basically exposed to the horrible air quality of the Superfund site to end all Superfund sites. And using that environmental exposure language to extend the coverage. The next one, which...
Well, actually, first I want to ask you, Andy, do you think that proposal has a better or worse chance than what, like 0.05% of actually surviving?
I would put
court
that one at a negative infinity percent
Yeah.
of surviving. And combine that with the fact that Joe Biden explicitly ran on not universal health care. So
yeah.
I wouldn't expect him to expend much political capital on that. Second one, which is getting a lot of press and think pieces and whatever else, navel gazing, is canceling a large chunk of student debt, using the, quote, compromise and settlement authority granted under the Higher Ed Act of 1965. The argument goes that you can essentially use this argument, brought forward by a Yale PhD student, argues that you can essentially use a strategy similar to prosecutorial discretion, where Department of Ed basically decides not to collect on student loans. And because the vast majority of student loans are now federally backed, it's not sure what would be able to get in the way of this, because the Supreme Court doesn't really tell the executive branch whether to enforce something or not. And I mean, although all bets are out the window now for no reason whatsoever. But if the Department of Ed basically considers every college student financially strapped and whatever, and they're going to use their discretion to not require repayment of the loans, then I could see that having a better chance of surviving some sort of judicial scrutiny and making a lot of people extremely upset and a lot of people extremely happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see them not collecting for the duration of the term, but I don't know that they couldn't, get rid of it all. They would just not be collecting, right?
Correct.
So then if an incoming administration came in, then they could just turn on the faucet.
Bingo, bango, Joe. That is one of the big things, is that you would basically have to get all future presidents to agree to this. The Office of Management and Budget would probably have something to say about it, because collecting on these loans is a source of revenue for the government. And right now, the federal government backs like $1.5 trillion of student loan debt. And that is a major source of revenue. And losing that would be not good for the balance sheet. And the other thing is that any loan debt that might be not collected on or forgiven, if it is termed as forgiven, the IRS might want to tax that money, which if you're a recent college grad with a giant loan, and then all of a sudden that loan is forgiven and the IRS says, oh, you owe taxes on that. And they say, well, with what money? There is a whole lot of second, what's the term? Second,
like collateral consequences.
yeah, collateral damage, as Arnold Schwarzenegger would call it. Another big one. I like this one. This is one that is very near and dear to my heart as a child of a postal worker, of a retired postal worker. Creating a postal banking system.
Oh, I've heard of this actually. Yeah.
Yeah. This is
Don't
essentially.
they do this in the UK?
Oh, yeah. A lot of European countries
Yeah.
do it, actually.
Okay.
It is basically using the post office as a free form of banking for people who are, not part of the financial system. They don't have savings accounts, checking accounts, whatever, because of it's too hard for them to access, or they don't make any money or anything like that. This anytime some like liberal technocrat proposes some super complex tax credit, one of the big hurdles to that is always that a lot of people that this might help, that these ideas may help, is that these people don't have banking accounts. Fun fact I read is that the post office is pretty much the only business corporation, whatever, in the country that has a physical brick and mortar location in every zip code in the country. 59% of post offices are located in zip codes with no physical bank branches. And
Oh, wow.
I know, yeah, think about a lot of those extremely rural zip codes. And combine that with lack of broadband internet, and some people have a hard time doing online banking even. And so existing law prohibits the USPS from offering, quote, new non-mail services. However, the USPS has, for a long time, provided money orders and other non-banking financial services. So there is an argument to be made that this wouldn't actually be anything new. This would just kind of be an extension of what they've always done, and just a new way for the post office to try and make some revenue. But it would also probably involve having to stack the Postal Service Board of Governors, which would have to get through Senate confirmation and all that.
Wow, that's really interesting.
I like it just because it's keeping banks on their toes, because banks are watching this closely, and maybe they'll go easy on the overdraft fees for some people, or because everybody, I mean, that's like everybody's biggest complaint.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have a lot of money in your bank account, then you end up paying more anyway. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that won't
And
help. I like
and
that
a
lot,
postal
too.
banking service wouldn't have to, offer mortgages and things like that your local bank branch does. It would literally be a place for people to deposit cash and write checks. It does it,
and not get charged all the fees
exactly
that they would
Yep.
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. Another big one is compelling lower drug prices using the, quote, eminent domain for patents power of federal IP law to lower drug prices. This was done. The most recent time that this was really threatened was in 2001, when then HHS Secretary Tommy Thompson was trying to procure a large government stockpile of Cipro, when everyone was worried that we were all going to get anthrax in the mail. And the name of the drug company escapes me, but they were basically playing hardball on it. And Secretary Thompson said, okay, I will distribute your intellectual property to generic drug makers. And very quickly they came to the bargaining table. And so using this power, you would still have to compensate drug makers who you, in essence, take their IP from. And you probably wouldn't want to do it a lot. But it is something that could happen in a emergency, which the country is certainly in right now. And there are just a host of other ones that those are like the big sexy ones that are like big. and so are the
Nothing sexier than a postal banking system.
Heck yeah.
But what we are more likely to see is reinstating the Obama Clean Power Plan, which set some pretty stringent emissions caps on power plants under the Authority of the Clean Air Act, probably undoing rollbacks of federal lands protections, such as right now what's happening in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, trying to convert the federal vehicle fleet to electric, rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, implementing green construction standards in federal contracting, requiring American-made steel, stuff like that in federal contracting, restarting pattern or practice investigations into police departments. Another big one, descheduling marijuana. That could happen without an act of Congress. Full legalization would require an act of Congress, but descheduling it is pretty simple. And you could use also instructing federal prosecutors to go easy on marijuana in states that have legalized it.
So these are ones, though, that are just being floated out there, right? These aren't necessarily ones that the incoming administration has said that they're going to do.
Correct. A lot of these things were part of these last ones that I mentioned were part of a Biden-Sanders kind of unity plan that everyone could live with. But I mean, these are all things that people would kind of expect, getting rid of the, what's it called? The global, what's it, the like shorthand for it? The abortion one.
Oh yeah. Was that the Mexico City one?
Yeah, the Mexico. It's called the Mexico City rule, or like the global gag rule, or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where we
I know
don't give money to to international organizations that like help pay for abortion. Like that'll be that switches every time control of the presidency switches parties, and that'll happen again on day one, probably.
Yeah.
As would probably rejoining the Paris Accords.
No, I hadn't heard any interest about descheduling marijuana.
Well,
so that one kind of
I certainly wouldn't expect a full-throated endorsement of that from the incoming reefer madness president that we could have.
Right.
Not that we condone the use of illicit substances on Find Laws, Don't Judge Me.
Well, but it's become a nonpartisan issue in a lot of areas. It's not so it might be. I mean, as more states pass laws legalizing it, or at least the medical use of it, then I think it will become higher up on that list for maybe either president. Either party.
Note to every single elected official: it was just fully legalized in South Dakota.
Yep.
I think it's safe to consider that this issue is resolved in the minds of the American public.
Yeah. A lot of it.
I think we're ready.
I learned a lot today. Thank you, everybody. I contributed very little, but I learned a lot. And that's all that matters.
Well, Allie, don't you have some fun ideas for the lawyers in our lives for this holiday season?
Let me rephrase. What I meant was I'm not going to contribute anything meaningful, but I'm happy to provide some garbage content. I mean, let's talk about stuff, right? We have nothing serious going on in the world. Let's talk about good old fashioned consumerism.
Yes. Let's get back to normal, baby.
I love it.
What really
That's
matters.
right.
That's what we're
Stuff.
about.
Okay, so we're entering the gift buying season. There's a lot of holidays people are celebrating in the next couple months, and given the lockdowns and people staying home to be safe, this year I'm personally thinking of going probably more in the realm of like Etsy and similar services for my shopping for all the lawyer type people in my life and other type people.
Etsy is
There's
not a
only
paid
really two
contributor of
kinds.
Find Laws Don't Judge.
No, Etsy is not. But yeah, there's really two types of people, right? Lawyer type and non-lawyer type. So I don't know. In any case, supporting some small businesses, and honestly, I went there and I was so totally blown away by how many creative options there are for lawyers or lawyer type people, law students, no matter what they're interested in. So, for example, if they're honoring RBG, there's a ton of options, paying tribute, or maybe they like the traditional gavel or skills of justice adorned wear. That's also common. They might be into coffee mugs that say snarky things, and the list there is endless. Some of them I'm going to need to be edited, beeped out, but they're good. So some examples include a mug that says, "Enjoying my hot cup of the opposing counsel's tears." That was a good one.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Has a Google search for best lawyer ever, and then you can put the person's name in the search, which I thought was cute.
Oh, that's cool.
Can you do worse?
Yeah, I like that.
You probably could. Yeah, you probably could. And it would be somebody else's name
Yeah.
you hate. You can, there's one that says, "Yes, you're being billed for this." So that would be fun to have while you're talking to a client. And then this is the one that's going to need to be beeped. It's, "I'm a lawyer, not a magician." So we'll have to beep on that one, but that was good. Then if you're looking more for apparel as a gift, there's a t-shirt that says, "We'll give legal advice for tacos." And just for the record, I will absolutely give legal advice for tacos.
I'll give legal advice for tacos, and I'm not a lawyer.
No.
Hey, I like it.
Andy, that's called unlawful practice.
Yeah,
of
UPL
law.
for tacos. There's a button that says, "I'm too hot for my briefs." That's another good one. Here's a few more cufflinks that say everyone's favorite asshole. Again, another beep for that.
Yes, I like that one.
And then here's a really cute one, and I Laura will know what I'm talking about here. So you can get a caricature of this person's face, take a picture of them and have them like drawn into a law office or in any setting that you want. I personally am pursuing this for my dog, and like this is a whole genre of like putting people's faces on other bodies, like Renaissance characters or like superheroes or whatever.
Yep.
So something kind of like that would be humorous and could be kind of a sweet gift. There are comics for the disgruntled lawyer. Humor that cuts too deep is what that is titled. And then finally, my personal favorites, because I'm very into cross stitch. That's right. I'm admitting it here on the air.
That was cool.
It keeps me busy and sitting still, but mostly snarky cross stitch. And this one, the first one is, "Dance like no one is watching, email like it may one day be read aloud in a deposition." That's a pretty good one. That's a cross stitch option.
Yeah.
That's long.
And finally, the last thing that is probably, I'm just going to say to my family who isn't listening, that this would be on my list because it combines three things that I love: RBG, Harry Potter, and cross stitch. And it says, there's a little image of RBG, and it says, "My Patronus is Ruth Bader Ginsburg."
Oh.
So anyway,
Oh man.
Is the
lots of
Patronus?
cute, lots of
Is the Patronus like that expecto
Patronum.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
the thing that comes out of your
Mhm.
wine
The
that
deer?
fights the Dementors.
The deer,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. It's usually an animal of some kind. Anyway, lots of cool ideas for gifts if you're, looking for something a little bit non-traditional, like obviously not a briefcase or like formal, like office wear because people aren't going in anymore. So
Right.
anyway, yeah, buy something for the lawyer you love.
Lawyers are people too.
That's right.
That's coming from me.
Yes, we are. Despite what Andy says. Thanks, Allie. Those are all really great ideas. And, it's kind of nice to end it on a positive note where we're not talking about a super serious issue and then I have to go into the outro. So thank you for that as well. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fine Laws Don't Judge Me. Please subscribe to our show wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a rating and a review if you want. And if you'd like to get in touch with us, please send us an email to podcasts@tr.com.
So yeah, I wanted to bring up Youngstown Sheet and Tube just because this kind of started the parameters under which executive orders were deemed as constitutional. Thanks, Andy. This is hard when you're okay.
No, it's
No,
literally
he's
no.
Andy. This is Andy.
It's
This is
literally
not you.
the name. It's literally just
Yes,
Youngstown Sheet
exactly.
and Tube.
Okay.
It is all
Cheating
that
and
just-
tube.
All right.
It's a steel manufacturer.
I mean, I know
Yeah.
what Youngstown, Ohio is all about. Sorry, I went from like series of tubes to Jeffrey Tube to Jeffrey Tubin to just.
Oh no.
I am sorry. No, you were completely. I'm sorry,
a
Joe.
series
No,
everything
that's
you were
okay.
doing
I
was,
just-
was totally fine.
Okay. All right.